do this. We're doing part two. Yep, we're wearing the same shirts, but guess what? You guys are probably coming back here after a couple weeks. This is not a lack of wardrobe on either of our parts. This is just the fact that
it's musician life.
That's right, man. We're recording back to back today just because we couldn't pick between whether we wanted to do Rubber Soul or Sgt. Pepper, so we're doing both today, or however many weeks apart. And okay, so once again, I have Justin Rice here on the Scratch Track. Guys, welcome. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't already, please do that on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, the Scratch Track Podcast. And you can follow me, Josh Plummer Music, on Instagram and Facebook, or you can friend me. Don't do that, though. I won't respond. No, I'm kidding. You can do that. It's fine. I'm not topped out on my friends list yet. I don't have that many. So, yeah, Josh Plummer on Facebook, too. That's where I post all my shit, so you can find that. And I'm going to hand it over to Justin. Plug your stuff again for us one more time, please.
Hey, everybody. My name's Justin. I play for a band called Guava Train. We play everything from funk, reggae, rock, blues, soul, to Brazilian bossa nova. Please check us out on Instagram at Guava Train Official is the name. Same as on Facebook, Guava Train Official. Give us a like, give us a follow. It really helps us out in this dark time for the local music industry. And we put on a good show. We've got a lot of different instruments, flute, sax, vocal harmonies. We've got the full band sometimes and duos other times. So we're pretty diverse and play covers as well as original music. So check us out, and hopefully you enjoy the good vibes.
Yeah, man, they do put on a great show, and they're a good follow on Instagram. Like I said in the last episode that we did together, it's great. You guys post regularly. You got a lot of, and the footage that you guys got was awesome.
Thanks. Yeah,
it's
we're
really
definitely
good.
Building it up. That's thanks to Moorfield Visuals, my friend.
Really good
David.
stuff. I need to get in touch with those guys because I need
He's
to.
the man. Yeah, independent too.
Really?
Yeah.
I need to just
Went
get
to
some.
UCF
I
too.
just need to get some better video.
Yeah. He's the man
stuff,
for
you know
that.
what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because I get all these videos from people that I love. Keep sending the videos when you see me performing and stuff. But the problem is when I go to post them, by the time they are shared and whatever, the resolution just gets so bogged down with how many times it's been filtered through sending via text or whatever, Facebook tagging or email, and then it's just
will diminish the quality too. I'm like, what the hell? This looks great on my phone. But...
Yeah. So, okay, so we didn't do this in part one. That might be a problem. I guess we'll figure it out when I start editing. We didn't do this in the last episode, so if it's cool with you, I want to start off by asking you what your scratch track is. So, like I've said before on this, the theme of the podcast is figuring out what's something that not necessarily like as cliche as like if you could go back in time and do something over again. Maybe it's something that you'd want to do again because it was so fun. Or something like a lesson that you wish you would have known in a specific situation. Like what's one of those? So start on that, and I'm gonna get the bone from this animal down here.
Yeah, if I had to think about what my scratch track would be, it would be learning that if you want to be successful in music and make it your career, you don't have to be famous for that to happen. I was always under the impression that you had to have really tens of thousands of followers and active listeners to be able to scratch out a decent living. But here I am, CPA, and I'm learning that a lot of these pretty good musicians who aren't the Shakiras of the world, aren't the Ed Sheerans of the world, they're making more money than I made when I was a CPA. So I think that, number one, I wish I would have known that, you can make money off of doing something you love, even if it sounds unusual or unorthodox, and to just go ahead and pursue it, because you only get one chance at the card game that is life. You can't change the cards that you're given, but you can change the way that you play them.
Mm-hmm. You can change them, but that's called cheating, and we don't like that. So
yeah,
you got
nobody likes a cheater.
Nobody likes a cheater. Yeah, I agree with that too, man. I remember hearing about local bands when I was a kid and going oh, is he famous? Are they on the radio? And my mom's just like, no, he's just in a band. He plays at the bar. I'm like,
yeah,
what?
So I was man, that's a hard life.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, yeah. So. Sorry about disappearing. Dixie was chewing on a bone. I got to get that off there because there was a lot of snapping and stuff. But don't worry, I'm not depriving her of food. She's just choosing not to eat today, so I decided to give her a treat because she was being good during the recording. And now she's being bad. She's being loud. So now she's just going to sit and probably beg and try to get this thing back from me.
She's being cute.
Ma'am. Hi. I love you, but we can't do this right now. Yeah, dude, I so identify with that too, because it was such a hard thing to realize. Like in the beginning, it was like, oh well, I have to sell out arenas when I do it. It's like, nah, like
Yeah.
there's plenty of people, and Florida especially. Like I mean, in the Pinellas area alone, I mean, there's so many musicians that are probably good enough to tour, like at least locally, and they're just they're doing what we do because they just love interacting on a more like personal level and stuff like
Absolutely.
that. So I love that. So yeah, I would agree with that too, man. And my scratch track, like I've always said, is figuring out how much money you can make doing it, and not necessarily putting it into like a rags to riches story where all of a sudden you're just like laying in a bathtub of cash. It's just like, can I do this to survive and pay my bills on a regular basis? And I didn't know that I could. And we were talking about, before we started rolling, we were talking about stories of your lack of success in getting people to pay you fairly in the beginning is such a problem, especially if you don't have anybody to tell you don't play for free.
Right,
so
right.
it's just so it's a lot. So that was always mine, man. I hated that, and I hate hearing stories about musicians that are like, well, I didn't make anything, but normally like they have good tips there. So I'm like, I hate that shit.
Yeah.
Because they're taking advantage of you, man. They're taking advantage of you. So you're providing a service, like you said. If you provide a service, you should be compensated for it. They're doing the same thing. They're providing you a service of alcohol or an environment or an atmosphere or food or whatever it may be, and they're getting paid full price for it. So the musicians should be getting paid full price as well. I totally agree with that. Oh man, it's sickening sometimes, but to the places that keep it fair, thank you so much. Thank you for keeping us alive. Thanks for taking chances on us.
Yeah, for real.
You guys are the best. So all right, so is there so I love to we didn't talk about this in the last episode, but I love the fact that when you play live solo, that you and your dad jam together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you guys play a lot together, like in the house?
We do, not as much as you would think, but we do like to jam, especially with the acoustics. And we like to do harmonies. We sing a lot of Beatles, and what's really been a big influence on my music and the way I play with other people has not just been my dad, but his brothers and one of his good friends who he played with in high school and college, who's like a brother to him. And when they came down for reunions, when I was in high school, because they all live outside of Florida now, when they'd come down and just jamming with them and learning how to improvise and how to put your own spin on a different cover and how getting along, and they would record themselves too, and just like seeing that and how much fun and joining in and improvising, that was a big influence. So to answer your question with a lot of fluff, yes, we do, but not as much as you'd think. And a lot of our influence comes from
I just think that's so cool, man. I've played a song with my dad one time, and it was such a crazy experience. Like you get to share the stage with the guy that like bought you the first guitar and like, taught you the first thing about music, and it's just like, wow, man, it's a really powerful experience. Even though we were playing in an open mic setting. But your dad's played at the Troubled Waters open mic before too.
Oh yeah,
I coaxed him into playing one time, and I was like, holy shit, this guy can play.
Yeah,
because you told me it was like, he'll. You told me John, right?
John.
Yeah. He was like, I was like, hey John, Justin said that you wanted to play a couple, because you told me like go over there and talk to him. He'll play a couple for you. And I was like, I remember he did Friend of the Devil, and I was like, you know what? I've never even tried to look at that song, and then that was what got me into looking at that song to play, and I was like,
nice.
Interesting, yeah, because it's always something that I've heard and I know it. I know a little bit of the Dead. I don't know a lot, but I know that song. Obviously its popularity is enormous, and the real fans probably hate it because that's the only one that people don't. That's the only one that people know that don't go to the shows as frequently as they do. But it was a great song, and he did a really good job of it. So I was very happy to have him there, man. He's a talent too. Was guitar his only instrument growing up, or did he do piano too? Did he ever sing? Well, obviously he sang, but like was he singing in bands?
He sang in church. I mean, like I don't think he wasn't in the choir, but he would sing like in Sunday school and stuff. He knew, I can't remember the name of the horn, like beluga horn or something like that.
The flugelhorn?
I don't know. It's like a mini tuba. I can't remember the name. Baritone horn. It's not the French horn. Okay. I think it's baritone horn.
Okay, yeah.
And from there, one of his brothers taught him guitar, and then the basics, and then he just learned the rest by listening to the vinyl and just taking the needle and putting
Yeah.
in and rewinding and
Yeah.
and trying to get things just right. And he's a by-ear player. I think that's why he has so much soul. And
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely tell in the style that he plays too that he's definitely one of the. He just likes to kind of feel the vibe of the song and kind of take it for what. And I think you do a lot of that too with Matt and in the band too. You guys do a really good job of improvising and taking what the song is giving to you at that point. Because I'm sure like Matt's a super talented player and so are you. When you can kind of get a vibe of the room, like, oh, they're, maybe I'll give them some of this time, and then like the next time you play the same room in the same song, it's a completely different vibe, completely different solo. So that's what I love about going to see you guys and hearing you play at only the open mics, unfortunately, but the stuff that I've seen on social media or whatever, I really enjoy watching you guys go through a super unique set list and making everything like making it a guava train experience. So I like that a lot. That's cool, man. I enjoy your guys' sound.
Thanks, man.
If I didn't, I wouldn't have you on here. So that's the whole thing. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So we're gonna. I wanted to spend a lot of time on this album. So if you don't mind, we're gonna dive into this early, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Because I know you know a lot about this, and I know a little bit. Full disclosure again, you remember I'm not a big Beatles guy. Don't know a lot. I know the basics. I'm very intrigued by their rapid success and their, extremely undeniable popularity within anybody. I mean, dude, people that don't know one Beatles song can still tell you that they exist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bands that can do that, but there's not many people that know. Like, the first thing I think of when somebody says the Beatles is just chicks going nuts and then like getting out of cars or planes or whatever and just like people crying seeing them in person.
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh my God, he's right there. Like that. That's what I see when I see the Beatles. And obviously their musicianship is no joke. I mean, I didn't get it. I didn't get it when I was a younger musician. I would always be like, I don't understand. Like, why are these guys like, you know what I mean? And then I started to listen more and started to get into more of their concept stuff like Sgt. Pepper, and then obviously revisiting Rubber Soul and some of the songs on there, like Norwegian Wood and In My Life, like we were talking about in the last episode. Going back and revisiting that as a musician now that plays and has spent time in the studio, you gain a whole new respect for like what they were trying to do and how they were able to capture so many people in a time where we weren't, it wasn't really like a volatile time, but it was still very questionable to still listen to this type of music from the older generations. You know what I mean? Like it was still frowned upon to listen to like rock and roll stuff that was talking about.
Yeah, this was still like the heavy music of the time.
Yeah. So it was like, what are we listening to? Why this is the devil's music? Like all that stuff, and it was crazy. So when was the first time you heard this all the way through? Like
all
when
the
you
way
really
through.
experienced it?
It was probably, it was in my bedroom. I remember my dad. So the way to kind of back up for a second, the way I got into music, like listening to music in general, was very chronological. I started with like Mozart and then kind of found my way into jazz, and then I made my way to the Beatles, and I tried to listen to them chronologically as best I could. Mm-hmm. So a few months after I was listening to the Beatles, I knew that this was going to be a big one. My dad told me Sgt. Pepper is one of the most influential albums of all time. So I kind of wanted to save it. You know what I mean? Because for me, I was experiencing, it was like a new release. I didn't want to listen to them all at once because then, I wouldn't have anything to look forward to. And, from the very first track into the second one, it was really cool how they like took this concept and made Sgt. Pepper. And then they have all these really psychedelic, trippy kind of sounds throughout the album. And I, started before there was Wikipedia, going on the internet and figuring out how they're doing this stuff. And I started learning more about the album and really what it was. And what it was is in '66, and before, they were touring all the time. They were doing 2 albums a year, and they were touring. And this is the first album where they sat down in the studio and they said, instead of doing a tour,
let's just create.
Let's create the tour. So they created this concept band called Sgt. Pepper and said, we'll make it so it's like people are at home at a concert. And there's really only 3 albums that fit the concept album experience, which is the first 2. Sgt. Pepper, and with a little help from my friends, and then Sgt. Pepper reprise at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the first time in history that a band came out with a concept album. So this is any concept album that's come after. This is really kind of the genesis of that. You know, you think of David Bowie, he's like a concept artist,
right?
You know?
Right.
And versus Ziggy Stardust, right?
Right. So one thing. So speaking of concept stuff, so what I've heard and what I've read about this and what I know from, they were sort of not paying homage, I guess, but wanting to create something similar to Pet Sounds and influenced by the Beach Boys. I
think so. Yeah.
I know that they were.
That was a wild album too.
Yeah, nuts. They were into that, and there was obviously some stuff on here that kind of it's a tip of the cap to that, being like all the animal noises on one of the final tracks.
Good morning.
The dog whistle and things like that. Yeah. So, it was just interesting to me because I didn't understand how closely, in not only chronologically, I didn't realize that Pet Sounds was before this either.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that they were fans of like the Beach Boys and stuff like that, because at that time you don't think that music can reach as far as it does, and then it does. Like ignorant young kids like us don't realize that you could still branch out back then 50, 60 years ago and still figure it out in a way that we still can do now in a much smaller sense, obviously, but it's really cool that they were influenced by people that were not as popular as they were, but were still famous musicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's pretty cool. Do you have a favorite song off of here? I know it's hard because there's so many great ones.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for me, it's tough. It's tough for me to even think of like a clear cut favorite, because there's a few that are at the top. It's like 1 and 1A kind of deal, But I would say I think that my favorite is, I'm just looking, make sure I'm not leaving anything out. I mean, A Day in the Life is as close to the top as you can get.
It's a masterpiece song.
It really is, man.
Yeah.
It's as close as you can get to the top. I would say like a 1A would be either Lucy or I love the reprise.
Oh, the reprise is excellent.
I love
they're bringing it all back to the beginning of the concept album.
I know. I just love it so much, man. I remember hearing that and like, just that quick, like that real snappy.
Sorry,
like,
but
drum.
it's time to go. And I remember that I'm like, oh, this is like the last song.
Yeah.
And then Day in the Life comes fading in. You're like, I remember thinking that. Thanks for giving me that sense of deja vu. I remember I was riding my bike when I heard reprise and really focused on the lyric. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I think I listened to this for the first time top to bottom maybe in college for I took a music rock and roll and American society class. One of the only classes I passed when I was there. But I loved it. Teacher was great. He was a super, super talented musician and composer, as well as just a music nut, dude. This guy knew everything. I mean, he was like pulling up slideshows that he wasn't even looking at. He was just like teaching from the top. Yeah. Especially this stuff too. So we went into Sgt. Pepper and we were talking about the my introduction to live audience on a record was Benny and the Jets as a kid, because my mom was a big Elton John fan. Nice. We didn't really have a lot of Beatles growing up, but I remember hearing the Sgt. Pepper stuff, and that's immediately what I was like, oh, that's where the idea came from. It was like from this, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but was this the first time where you hear like a live audience kind of deal in a studio recording?
I think it's prominent. It was the first time, at least from an album that wasn't actually live, where they had like a live audience in the background, and that was not just one piece. It was like a consistent theme, or they intended it to be, but they really only did it in the first two songs, and then the rest they just say that's Sgt. Pepper, and then they have the fade out at the end, and. But yeah, I believe that was the first. Yeah,
that's what initially grabs you, because back then, I mean, this came out in '66, so this is
67.
67, sorry, many years ago, where you don't even really think that's I mean, it's an idea that's kind of overused, not overused, but you know where it's it's way more prevalent now than it was back then. So it's not something, it's not as unique as I can only imagine being around, in that time when that's released on the radio. You go like, oh, what's this? Like, are they playing live? Like, no, this is the studio or whatever. So I thought that's a really interesting way to start something like this and go into one of the most influential albums of all time and start it in kind of a quirky, funny, silly way where it's like, they're laughing in the background and cheering, hooting and hollering.
People are tuning up.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you just kind of get that vibe of it being like oh, interesting. So, okay. So, depending on how much you know, I don't know a lot about this. So can you sort of conceptualize this album for me? Like sort of go through like the themes of it and chronologically, and like, can you enlighten me on this?
Yeah, the best way I can describe it, I've already talked about the fact that it's a concept album.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be live, but from there, when you get into the third track with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, from there, it really starts to get psychedelic.
Yes.
And it's very different. And you'll notice when, if you zoom up on the album, they weren't trying to be the cute boy band anymore.
Yeah.
They were growing mustaches and stuff like that, which, wearing really funky clothes. And then it just gets to the point where, she's leaving home. That has like an orchestra. It's not rock and roll. It's not pop. It's a beautiful song. But, it really, as you go on, you start to really realize, especially if you heard their prior stuff and you're a musician, like, gosh darn, they had complete artistic freedom at this point. Yeah. I think they were on Apple Records, their own, and they're like, this is what we want to do. We know it's not popular or cool, and they just did their own thing. And then as it goes in, it goes back to Sgt. Pepper with the reprise. But they've just got a lot of amazing tracks on here, like Good Morning, Good Morning. It's kind of rock, but then they've got this orchestra in the back, and then there's this screaming guitar solo in the middle. That's maybe 10 seconds of bliss. And I remember the first time I heard that, I said, holy shit. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And, thinking about it today, it's probably not the most impressive of solos.
But back then it's like, what is this? Yeah.
It was dirty and really loud and
Bites.
just overtakes everything. And, this album just, it went to 2 initially, but then it quickly went up to number 1 on the Billboard charts. And, Pet Sounds was out at the time by the Beach Boys. And, is it Brian Wilson?
Brian Wilson.
He said,
that's another story that I want to get into, man, because that guy, that dude was fucked up, man.
This might have fucked him up a little bit more. Is that sorry, I really don't know if this is the case, but this is true. When this album came out, they were all really excited about Pet Sounds. Thought that they'd hit their masterpiece album, which maybe it was. But they heard this one and they all thought to themselves and recounted that, wow, this is truly the album of the year. We thought we had it. And Disraeli Gears by Cream was out too. And Clapton and Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker of Cream thought, we've got it. Like Disraeli Gears are at the top. And no, they here Clapton said, we all put on Sgt. Pepper, we all tripped on acid, and we all thought it was the greatest album we've ever heard. I mean, it is a really good album, and all the psychedelic sounds, I think, and experimentation makes it just that much cooler and unique for the time. Yeah,
Brian Wilson was misdiagnosed. So when I say fucked up, I don't mean he was messed up in the head. He was misdiagnosed and taking medications that was basically turning him into somebody that he wasn't. But he was also a very, very unique person. Like I'm pretty sure he stopped touring with the band to create Pet Sounds.
He did,
hiring the orchestra and everything. So he was like, "Fuck this! I just want to build this." And so so there's obviously themes of like very psychedelic stuff and the biting guitar solo and a lot of sitar on here.
A lot of sitar.
A lot of it.
Yeah, Within You, Without You. That is a very
trippy.
Very trippy.
I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and it really is.
Yeah, it's crazy. She was gnawing on that thing. You could hear that in the microphone, but she's okay. Hi.
Hey, Jasmine.
Jasmine just got home, so now we can't talk any more dirty thoughts. No more dirty stories, Justin. Okay, so so obviously Sgt. Pepper's was. It was. Do you know where the name came from? Because I've read multiple reports, and I want to know what the real thing is.
Well, according to Paul, he said that he came up with the name. Well, first of all, the concept album. He saw that Elvis Presley hadn't gone on tour the year before, and he's just sent a Cadillac around. They drove it around the stage like, this is the new Presley album. It's like, you're great. Right. And he's like, man, I don't want to tour anymore, and it's getting crazy. And I think he was on a plane or something. And he was eating, and they passed him the salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, Salt and Pepper, like Sergeant Pepper, a band. Oh, this be a cool concept. And it kind of just evolved from there. And, and by this point, the Beatles started writing a lot of stuff separately too. So some of the songs are purely John, purely Paul, with a little bit of collab, and that's what also makes this album kind of unique. Is that sense that you get a lot of different sounds, a lot of different artists, if you will, on this, so to say, different artists.
I feel like, so it's Paul that's singing the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club in the beginning, right?
Yep.
He's got such a high register.
I know
that he doesn't. I mean, he probably does get a lot of credit for this. This is just me being a dumb just listener for the first time. But I was listening to this last night and revisiting it, and this morning as well, to prepare for this. I'm like, his voice is really, really good.
It is.
I mean, it's like he's got that perfect combination of that grit, that high register, and he's not screaming doing the whole metal screaming, but it's up in that high register. So you go from that to is Ringo the one that sings lead on, or who sings lead on he does, right?
That's Ringo, yeah.
So he does that, and then Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is John. So you go bang bang bang. The top three on that is three completely different sounds.
Yeah.
Which I think is so cool that they were able to do that, and that was one of my favorite things about listening to these guys growing up, is that you step out of that box of that normal instrumentation of all right, drummer stays back there and shuts the fuck up. The bass player is not doing anything but, just providing a backbone. The lead guitar player is only going to play lead, and then you have the singer and he's everything, and then that's it. But it was it was double leads, for years and years and years, and everybody's like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
It's they're changing your life. That's what they're doing. Aren't you seeing this?
Now that we're saying this is kind of something that I try to apply to Guava Train. Beatles obviously the most influential band for me, and not comparing myself to the Beatles at all. But what I like to do with Guava Train is I really like when Jody sings, then I'll sing, then Matt will sing, then we'll sing together, and then I pick up the saxophone and Matt's playing the bass and Jody's on the keys, or just the fact that they switched up the Good Morning guitar solo. I think that was played by Paul.
Oh, interesting.
And he's playing the bass, and they weren't afraid to switch up.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made this a healthier collaboration, just a nice mix of different talent.
So who out of the 4 or 5, if you count George Martin, who out of the 4 or 5 of them is your favorite member of the band? Who do you think best songwriter, whatever, overall, who do you think is the Beatles?
It's hard to say. I'd say my favorite is John. I think I relate to him the most because his songs are pretty different. My songs are pretty different, and he's also he doesn't have the voice. He would say multiple times that I don't like my voice, but he worked on it with what the cards he had, and he made it. So I think especially early on, pre-65, John was really driving the band and really helping them to get their spirits up, when they were playing in Hamburg, Germany. And I don't want to book the Beatles, a second act band, but later on, I think Paul McCartney is, especially with the whole concept of Sgt. Pepper, I think that he kind of stepped it up too. But I would have to say I'm partial to John. He's my favorite.
I feel like I identify with him the most as well, just because of obviously the relationship issues that happened and becoming a songwriter that a lot of people identified him as this, jumpy boy band, love songy kind of guy, and then you drop something like Imagine, which, one of the most well-known songs ever, but one of, his greatest solo piece probably, ever. I'm not really familiar with the rest of his solo work, but that to me is just that's what I always identify with him as, and it's just interesting because you go from a guy who is seen as this kind of, young kid, quirky, innocent dude, pretty boy looking guy, and then he drops, a solo album, and you get to see a whole new side of who he is, what he's going through, and not less about love, more about unity, and more about struggles with just being who he is and things like that. There's a lot of themes of almost a melancholy kind of vibe to his solo stuff. Not all, obviously, but he, I feel like he was probably my favorite as well, just because of that. But I also I'm not saying this to discredit Paul at all. I think Paul McCartney's still one of the greatest musicians that we've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
Now, here's what I want to swing into. Speaking of Paul McCartney, is Paul McCartney alive or dead?
He is definitely alive.
Okay,
Most definitely.
Let's put that to rest right now, because there's so many people, man. How many people have you talked to that do that?
A lot,
right?
Yeah.
So
And it's honestly, it's getting ridiculous.
It started with this album, though.
Like,
yes.
come on, dude. He's like a legend now,
Yeah.
and like to be able to switch that up and not
Yeah.
have any slip ups this whole time. Like even his family, like we're gonna go along with this game.
Yeah,
too.
right.
Like his
Everybody
daughter's
shut
like,
up, yeah.
that's my dad. That's
Yeah.
right.
So the rumor was that in an early moment of the Beatles, he died in a car accident.
Yeah.
And was replaced with a guy that
lookalike.
looked exactly like him.
He was just as talented. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, same exact voice,
Yeah.
same exact face, height,
Yeah.
left-handed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That alone, finding a left-handed bass player
Well,
in the 60s
yeah.
got to be ridiculous.
Yeah,
man.
yeah. I didn't even think about that shit. Like everything
You
you
know?
know on bass, you need
Flip
to
it around.
flip it around,
Yeah.
dude. You want this, right? You want
Yeah,
this.
you
You want to be one of the Beatles, or do you want this whole thing to collapse? Because it's just a house of cards, buddy.
I don't know if I
Flip
can
it around, okay?
I don't know if I can play left-handed. Do you know how much ass you're going to be getting? Okay, I'll figure it out. So yeah, that was always a thing that I would hear about this. And so did it start with this album when the rumors kept like coming around? Because I know like the whole thing about A Day in the Life. At the end of it, you hear it backwards or whatever. You
Paul
hear
is
Paul is
dead
dead
or
or
something like
all
that.
that stuff. Have you heard that? Have you done it before? Have you picked up on anything?
You know, I probably have. I remember I was really nerdy about those little things, and I tried to listen for like the little hidden things
Yeah,
in their
yeah, yeah.
songs. You know, some things they didn't mean to put in there, but I think it's just kind of a coincidence. And some people just like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of sounds like that. It's like, well, you probably like put your literary interpretation on like anything, but
Yeah, I'll always say it's the whole yellow car phenomenon. You know, if you're looking for a yellow car, you're gonna see more of them. You know,
Yeah,
so if
yeah.
you're listening for a specific message in something, you're gonna hear it.
Yeah.
So, but also, is there anything more fucking creepy than hearing songs backwards?
dude, so weird.
Dude, it's
First time I did it was with Stairway to Heaven. I was like, I gotta figure this out.
Bro, oh yeah, yeah.
Like maybe it really is satanic, and then,
Yeah,
and then afterwards I like thought about it. I'm like, man, I feel bad for Robert Plant and
yeah.
Jimmy Page. They have to deal with this shit like
Yeah,
forever.
it's not satanic, but it is stolen. Whoopsie. They were notorious for that, and that's the thing that never really plagued the Beatles because they were just so they were so different and everything like that. I don't think
Yeah.
they ever really had any issues with that. None that I know of about that, but
Maybe, but I don't think so. It would have been something petty, that's for sure.
yeah, nothing as prevalent as I know. Zeppelin has been through the ringer with that stuff because they took a lot of stuff from an early blues band that not a lot of people know about, and it's the whole thing. So yeah, I don't know enough about it to be educated enough. So if you know the story, look it up and prove me wrong. I'm here to learn just like you are. So, all right. Did you say your favorite song, by the way?
I
Do
did.
you have one to pick?
My favorite. I think I would have said Good Morning," but
Oh yeah.
it's really tough to choose with this album. But I yeah, probably Good Morning," even though that is quite an unusual one. But just the whole blend. The first two
Yeah.
songs are incredible.
Oh,
you know,
so
it's
great.
just such a nice build up to the album.
So great. So let me look at my notes here. 'cause
There
there's
is
a couple
actually
things.
one thing I should say about this album.
Hit me.
So the Beatles would always come out with the singles before the albums, and they almost never put the singles onto the album because they wanted to incentivize people to buy both.
Yes.
And they didn't think it was fair.
The two were
Strawberry Fields,
and Penny Lane,
and
right.
they should have been on this album because they fit perfect. And if I had to pick my favorite, it would by far be Strawberry Fields. That song
Really?
we could do probably half a podcast just talking about.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, like they took like maybe 40 different takes of John, you know, with his guitar and you know mix of the band, and then they took the three best and they spliced them together, which was really difficult for the time. They were using tape, not like digital, you know, they were using recording tape.
Yeah.
So there's a point in the song where it like speeds up and it slows down and you hardly notice it, but when you break it down, you're like, wow, that's what's driving part of the song, the uniqueness, you know, the backwards recordings
Yes.
and all the extra stuff they're adding in. It was just so experimental for the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So that one's my favorite, Strawberry Fields, even though it's unofficial.
Love it. Okay, gotcha. All right. Do you have a favorite set of lyrics on this album? Any song that stands out to you in particular?
Favorite one in particular. You know, it's kind of one of the more, I guess you could say, like non rock and roll, but I think the lyrics in "When I'm 64" are really good, man.
Yeah, I always forget that that's on this record.
It's just so clever the way it's put together.
It's great. So in terms of like chronological, like taking it, or not chronological, but top to bottom in terms of track, is there a story that's taking place throughout this? Like a lot, I know, like, so for Dark Side of the Moon, for example, when you start at the top, like the conceptual album, the Speak to Me, Breathe, it's you're being born into the world, and then the adolescence, and then the money and time are the things you're stressing about, and then like towards the end, it's the whole like, you know, us and them, and then the Brain Damage and Eclipse is like, that's the end of the, like, your life essentially, and it goes back into the heartbeat fading out, and then that's it. So is there something that they were going, what is the concept of what they were going for here? Like, what is the specific theme that they were hitting in this?
They were really trying to go like, you're in a concert and you're listening to Sgt. Pepper. You're not listening to the Beatles this time. You're listening to Sgt. Pepper and his Lonely Hearts Club Band, you know.
Gotcha.
And, you know, as you go through the album, it doesn't necessarily have the crowd noise at the back of every single one. But, you know, it really does feel like a different band.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you get to, like, She's Leaving Home and When I'm 64, or For the Benefit of Mr. Kite. Like, that's almost like a show just all in itself. They're talking about Mr. Kite, and they have all these really psychedelic sounds of going up and down. And then at the end, they kind of tie it all back in together.
Right.
And they're like, hey, it's sorry, but it's time to go. And they have their kind of their encore.
Yeah.
And it all accumulates with the noise and that one, you know, piano chord coming down, just fading out, and just
I love that.
them being you know, cheesy at the end with the record. I don't know if you've worked in the very, very end, the last 30 seconds.
It's, what does he say? What is the thing
like,
that's
I wouldn't
repeating?
have any other way.
Right.
I don't know what he's saying, but
it's
just weird. I can't imagine like all these people like Eric Clapton like tripping on acid or whatever, or, you know, wasted, and they're like, oh, that was a great album. And all of a sudden, I wouldn't have any other. Like, you think that like the album's skipping or something, and you know they just like put that shit in to fuck with people.
Yeah, they're just doing it because they're like, hey, by the time your trip is about to be done, you're gonna have a bad one.
Yeah.
Here we go, baby. Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah. Oh my God. I've always wanted to experience that, just to know what it's like. I've never done it before.
Yeah, it was definitely on my my list of things to do in college, and
I never did it.
Yeah.
I never did it because I never got around people that I trusted enough to do some sort of drugs.
Or people that I would trust enough to know that it's like real acid and not just like something like fake. Like, dude, I know. And how the fuck would I know?
I know.
You know what I mean?
Like, nobody would know.
I want to fry my brain out just for like a magic time.
I do know a guy too. I knew
not judging
quite a few people that have done it around the wrong crowds, and they're saying like it can really ruin your experience just by the surrounding of it, your mentality going into taking it and everything like that. So it's a little bit, it's always a little bit spooky to me, like, because I have anxiety already, man. That's why I take edibles before I go to sleep, so I can turn my mind off and not stare up at the ceiling and go like, I'm not making enough money, you know, like, things like that. So I don't I've never really trusted anything like that before. So okay, so the thing that I wanted to talk to you about too about this album is that I wasn't aware of the timeline of this, but I know that they stopped playing because it just got so insane.
It got so insane
because they couldn't go anywhere without being like, I mean, mauled by everyone, and it was so nuts.
And you know, that was actually more, if you can believe it, that was one of the more minimal factors. What really sucked is that you had the Beatles, you know, one of the greatest bands of all time, coming out to play at Shea Stadium. And they got tens of thousands of people there. And the girls are screaming so loud that even the Beatles couldn't hear. And you hear Ringo, you know, people interviewing Ringo. And he's like, yeah, I just kind of saw how like John's butt was like going up and down like to the beat. And that's like what I knew. And like John, you know, in interviews be like, oh, instead of I want to hold her hand, I'd say I want to hold her gland, like talking about like her breasts, you know, like because nobody would know. And they were bringing out these
That's funny.
the big 100-watt
Yeah.
Vox amps, and they'd
Yeah.
have 10 of them
Yeah.
for a whole fucking stadium.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming to the point where they're just like,
Jesus.
this is not fun.
It's so wild.
And because of the contracts they signed, they weren't making a lot of money, and they're like, we're having a lot of fun in the studio, and they're just over it.
Man.
They're over. It was only a few years of like 2.5, 3 years of Beatlemania in the U.S., but that was just enough that they're like,
Yeah.
we can't do this.
Yeah, and I know that there was also stuff going on with like they were getting threats
Oh yeah.
saying it's not safe to travel to so and so, and you know they were, and a lot of it stemmed from the fact that right around this time, I believe that's when John Lennon made the remark that the
Yeah.
Beatles were more popular than Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
And everybody was like, "Oh yeah."
And you know what he said? You know what he said after they started burning his Beatles album and some of the more conservative. They said, "What do you think about that, Mr. Lennon?" And he said,
He already bought it.
"He said, well, yeah, you got to buy them before you burn them."
Like,
He's like, "Okay."
That's why I see that in sports. I'm like, good for you, bro. You
Yeah,
spent
like,
$80 on a fucking Stitch jersey, and are you gonna burn it because you don't like the guy?
Exactly.
You already bought it.
I
Who
see
fucking
people.
cares?
I remember after like the Kaepernick thing being signed to Nike, like people were burning their Nike shoes. I'm like, dude, like what
Yeah.
the fuck? You know how many people would like love to have like a
It's-
decent pair of
I
shoes,
know.
and you're like burning that shit up because like one of their sponsors like hit you
I know.
the wrong way.
God, yeah, it's a whole thing. It is kind of funny though. Like on the opposite side of that, like I know that there was a beef between, like, this is going way on the other direction of the Beatles, but there was a beef between like 50 Cent and somebody, and he bought out like the first like 4 rows of somebody's concert that he didn't like, so the front of it just looked empty as fuck.
Oh my god, that's pretty clever.
It's funny. I can't remember who it was that he did that to, but he's funny in like his like little petty flexes that he has, and it's really funny.
That is pretty funny.
So okay.
I would have to say, I would have to be laughing if somebody did that.
Oh
shit to
yeah,
me.
it'd
That
be
was
like,
funny.
well, I mean, hey, you bought
Be
them,
like, bravo.
So, you know,
Bravo.
you bought the seats though. You know what I mean?
For the first 2,000 people, come on
Yeah,
and
right.
move on up.
Okay, so I asked you who your favorite Beatle was, but who do you think overall? Who do you? I don't know if I asked you this already or if we've talked about this in passing. Who do you think is the best overall musician in the group? Not your favorite.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the most talented musician, songwriter, player, whatever?
It's always tough. This is like the age-old question, but I'm gonna have to say it's Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not just because he's better, but I think that, you know, he just took his musicianship to the point where he really wanted to know everything in the
Yeah.
world under. I mean, he was trying
Yeah.
all different. He was even doing a little bit of reggae when he was with Wings under like a different name.
Yeah.
And he also, I mean, even at this point in his life, he's in his late 70s, and he just came out with a new album, and you know that like the period between 1980 and like 2020, where you know Lennon was unfortunately murdered.
Yeah.
You know, he was continuously working on his musicianship, and
Yeah.
his songwriting, when you really break it down, I mean, it's just really beautiful and amazing that, you know, this little kid from like Liverpool was able to compose
Yeah.
these things like a full orchestra and
Yeah.
stuff. And
So can we talk a little bit about his murder?
Yeah.
Because it's always kind of intrigued me with the story. Not intriguing that I'm like into it, but it's just an interesting moment because in 1980 you had 3 deaths in the music scene that were, I mean, none were as monumental as his, but I could be leaving somebody else out. But the 3 that I know that died in 1980 are Bon Scott from AC/DC,
Yep.
John Bonham in 80 as well, and John Lennon. And John obviously it was a different situation because he didn't like drink himself to death,
Right.
or have an unfortunate medical situation. He was shot and killed
in front of his own place
in New York.
his own
Yeah.
his own house. Yeah,
And so the guy that shot him though is he still alive?
he is.
He's still alive, right?
Yeah, he's still in prison too.
God, not a lot of Beatles fans in prison, I guess.
Yeah, he probably doesn't want to get out at this point.
Yeah, right.
Getting death threats every single day.
Yeah, dude. Mail's full.
Yeah.
Any love letters? Not a single one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy, what was his name?
It was Chapman.
Chapman.
Mark
That's right.
Chapman.
And he was at one point like a fan club leader.
Huge
yes?
fan. Huge fan of the Beatles.
So was it the Jesus remarks that,
was
set
a
him
big
off?
part of it.
It
Yeah,
was?
he had. I mean, from what I've read about him, you know,
Jeez, man.
it really shouldn't be giving the guy, you know, too much
Yeah.
free advertising, but
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
he seemed to have some kind of personal conflict with himself, and
of course,
and what's ironic is he actually met Lennon a few years with intending to kill him.
Wow.
And the story is, and there's a picture of him with Lennon. I think it's from this moment. He was outside the Dakota, which is that beautiful penthouse, right on Central Park in New York City, and he asked Lennon to sign the album, and Lennon's like, of course, and signs it. Is there anything else I can do for you? Like offering, and like the guy is like there to kill him, and he decided not to.
So he was just too nice and couldn't do it.
He couldn't do it, and for some reason something happened, something clicked where he said, "I got to finish the job," and it was a terrible moment. And I've talked to a few people, including my dad, about this. Because for me as a fan growing up, Lennon had died almost 30 years before,
right. Mm-hmm.
And it was just really unfortunate and that's why I didn't want to listen to all the albums at once. I wanted to be like
keep it
separate, so I could experience it.
I get it.
And I think what really pained people is the fact that these children of the '60s were like, it made me feel like I had grown up, but not in a good way. To know that not only are the Beatles not here, this music I grew up with, but there will never be a Beatles again. And losing someone like that, people, it was big, man, because there was always that possibility. God. And the stuff alone they were doing was still so good. Good.
I've never obviously back then there was a lot of deaths in the music industry that like rocked the world because it was so bad. Obviously you have Lennon that was murdered, and you have Bob Marley.
I think he was 81 was the year he died too.
But he was shot at many times.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And Dimebag Darrell got shot on stage from Pantera.
Yeah.
You get a lot of these guys that are just nuts, that just hate it so much that they just can't handle it. But yeah, Bob Marley's death is a little bit different because you always talk about people like what he's known for. You always see like, it's just some stoner chick has a poster of Bob Marley in her thing. Cause not because she likes the music.
And I love Bob Marley, but he was a very flawed individual, as was Lennon too.
Yeah.
If we're being fair, as was Lennon.
Yeah, and the thing about Bob Marley was that he had like cancer in his toe.
Yeah. And
they were like, look, we can cut this off and you're done, man.
He's like, nah, man.
He's like, nope. That's just the way it's supposed to go.
Foot,
and we're like, everybody's like, dude, don't do this.
Yeah.
He was like, no, I'm just gonna let it do it. And then, God, the balls on that guy. I was like, I've lived it. I've lived my life. I've given love to people. I've shared my art and my music, and that's all.
Yeah.
And he got to make that choice, but like guys like Lennon didn't get to make the choice of.
No.
They don't get to, and those guys that have the horrible addictions and mental illness that goes on so prevalently in music, a lot of those guys don't get a choice either.
No.
They just
don't even
here
know what
one
they're
day
getting
gone the
into.
next. They have no idea. And I'm the one that hit me the hardest is there was a long string of celebrity deaths around like 2015, 2016, like David Bowie and like Alan Rickman, and then there was Chris Cornell that hit me really hard. And then there was a ton more. I mean, I'm missing a ton, but I remember those three happened pretty close together. I remembered the feeling of like, oh, I'm becoming an adult now because I know who these people are that are dying. Whereas when I was a kid, I didn't realize like Lane Staley died when I was very small, from Alice in Chains, and obviously like the death that happened before I was alive, I didn't really understand the magnitude of that. But like as I was getting older, I've seen some of these people live before. I've listened to their music for years, and then all of a sudden it's like bang, it's gone. And that is so heavy to deal with, like as a kid. And the fact that John Lennon was one of those guys to those people. I mean, he was one of the biggest musicians to ever live.
Yeah.
And that happened like just like that, like bang. One day he just walks outside and then that's it.
Yep.
It's over. It's so crazy, man. To even think that that's here one day and then gone the next, man. It's so wild. But we have his music that lives forever, and that's the special part about art, is that there's no specific timeline to it. You can discover it 30 years later and still love it the same as maybe your dad did when he first heard it.
And and I'll say something unique about the Beatles in general, and I guess really this album too, especially so, maybe out of any of their albums. I remember when I was speaking to my grandpa on my dad's side, I was probably 12, 13. I was really getting into the Beatles, and I told my grandpa, I'm like, Grandpa, I'm like, the Beatles, they're going to be around forever. People are always going to love them. And he's like, with his wisdom, he was like, well, I've said the same thing about like these artists too. And he's probably thinking like Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, but the fads pass. I'm like, I don't know, Grandpa.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think this is really going to stick around. And now that I'm an adult and now I can really think clearly about it, it's true. The Beatles are going to be considered, if they're not already, like the Mozart of their time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
When people think back into like pop music and like recording in general, they're going to think back to like Sgt. Pepper if they're going back into history. They're and even generations after me are getting into it. And I'm like, wow, it's like self-sustaining at this point. It's incredible how much influence music, 12 notes, just 12 notes, can have on people. It can make people cry, make people laugh, make people want to boogie. And
it's
incredible.
It's really crazy though, man. I mean, I feel like it's very important to educate yourself on where things started and where it came from, and a lot of it came from the Beatles. A lot of songwriting that we still use today came from that. Yeah. A lot of popular formulas of how to get on the radio are still that. A lot of the lyrical content it's still that. It's love songs, it's drug songs, it's with a poppy, catchy backbeat, good, solid harmonies, and the instrumentation of bands also they were a big part of that too.
Oh yeah,
because it was a lot of the bands around that time. It wasn't a specific like 4-piece. Everybody had their job, and then the harmonies and everything like that. Those were, they were big at a time, but it was like a lot of 10 years before they're coming out. You have a lot of like. Standard jazz stuff. You have a lot of blues guitar players. You have a lot of like rock didn't really exist. There wasn't really that stuff. There was like a lot of loungy kind of stuff going on and orchestral, but it wasn't necessarily like a basic rock instrumentation of 2 guitars and a drummer and a bassist. At least
not in the mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was you have that formula that worked forever, and it's still used today. So it's They were a band. They are a band that I respect heavily now, and I'm like, I don't pretend to know a lot about them. I've said it before on this episode and the first part. I don't know a lot about the Beatles. I'm not a Beatles nerd. That's why I want to have somebody on here that knows a lot about them and is like geeks out with like the little intricacies of like the totally Easter eggs. Like I love listening. I love hearing that about people because that's how I am with certain artists, and I enjoy learning about this. So that's my favorite part about doing this podcast is to not only revisit artists that you love, but also to educate yourselves on stuff that like maybe you see in passing and go like, oh yeah, okay, but then you dive deep into it and it's like, oh wow, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because like the last time I listened to this album top to bottom was years ago. Maybe it might not have even been in one sitting either. So it's just interesting to go back and listen to it, and that's the whole importance of vinyl too. Is
You're stuck.
The way you listen.
Yep.
You have to be invested in it.
Yep.
That's why I love it.
Yeah, and that's something I think we lack nowadays with, obviously iTunes is like defunct now, but with Spotify is that I feel bad for some folks who don't realize the magic of listening to a whole album or at least like big chunks of it, because sometimes, especially in this case, the album is like meant to be listened to all in its entirety, or it's just cool to listen to its entirety so you can compare it to other albums and be like, wow, that's what the artist was like trying to do or going through at that time. And it's cool to get, and you don't get that perspective when you're just listening to greatest hits like all day, like, oh, I want to experience like the Rolling Stones, so I'll put on greatest hits, and all you get is like Satisfaction.
Yeah, right.
Get some of their out, their
that's why
stuff.
I don't know. I started my vinyl collection about a year ago, and other than like, Legend, obviously Bob Marley, I don't really have any like greatest hits stuff, because I feel like that takes away from what they were trying to do as an artist. Like I'm struggling with that right now because we're going into the studio tomorrow to finish up one of the singles, but I'm trying to make it as chronologically accurate to kind of take you through where I started, what I felt, where I was, and where I am now, with the exception of some sort of like anthemic stuff that needs to go at the top and bottom of the record.
Man, I can't wait to hear it.
It's gonna be fun, man. But it's also a little nerve-wracking for me because number one, I'm a perfectionist and I know what it needs to sound like, and when it doesn't, it kind of gives me a little bit of like anxiety. I'm like, I just always want it to be the best that it can be. And Steve Connolly at Zen Recording, he does a fucking phenomenal job of making me sound way better than I actually am. And Keith does the same thing, man. He lifts me up and he breathes life into these songs that I sit here playing in a dark room. Some of them crying, some of them not, but like most of them I play alone by myself, and I bring it to him, and he just immediately is like, I got something for this. I got a motif for this.
Yeah.
So it's just I'm struggling with that as a musician now, because when I put the EP out, when I put Before You Dig out, it's not something that like is sort of it's a story in a sense. It's got its themes and whatnot, but it's not something that I like. It's only 4 songs, so there's not really much to it other than a few songs that I wanted to put on there to like kind of let people know like what I am. You know, so now that I have the freedom of doing like a full 13-track record,
Yeah.
I want to make it count, you know. So, and that's the thing. Like a lot of Steve is also he's a big Beatles guy too. He loves the '60s
Nice.
music, man. He's awesome producer. He loves all that shit, man. He's a super talented guitar player, very knowledgeable producer, mixer, master. I mean, He's great, man. I'm looking forward to going back in and working with him tomorrow. It's gonna be fun. But okay, so last question. Is this your favorite album by the Beatles, and by how far is it in the lead?
I don't know.
Is it not?
I've been asking myself for years which one's my favorite, and I listen to one, I'm like, this one's my favorite,
Yeah.
the best. And then I listen to another, I'm like, maybe this, because they're all so different, but it definitely has a special place in my heart. I would, yeah, it's probably number one, if not close to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I need to do an appropriate dive on their back catalog before this stuff, and because I obviously know songs, you know, I know like I'm a little bit more familiar with like the Abbey Road stuff, and like
Yeah,
this,
Abbey Road's
you
an
know,
incredible
great,
album. Incredible.
great, yeah, and I, you know,
See, now I'm thinking, like, is that the number
yeah,
one?
right.
Like, maybe that's my favorite. Maybe that's the best.
That's tough, man. That's how I am with a lot of artists. You're like, oh, you go back and revisit an album, you're like, oh, but maybe this is good too. You know,
Yeah.
it's always right around there. But I was really excited that you picked these albums, because I was hoping that my hope is when I bring guests in to do this is that they don't, like, obviously I love talking about stuff that I know about, because it makes me look a little bit smarter than these 2 last Beatles episodes did. But
Oh, you did great, man.
the most fun thing for me is learning about music that I typically wouldn't that I typically wouldn't have maybe listened to top to bottom unless you told me like, hey, these are the albums that I want to do. Just because, not because I don't like the Beatles, just because there's so much music out there.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
There's a ton, so it's like it gets kind of
Like, if
gets kinda
sometimes
lost
people
in
are
the-
like, you know, I'm playing out, like, how do you not know this artist?
Yeah.
You not know this song? Like,
I know a
like,
lot more,
buddy,
though.
I'm like, I'll definitely give him a listen, but there's only so many hours in the day and like
yeah.
a universe full of music, you know? It's
so true. It's so true,
and
man.
you can, I mean, probably in your lifetime you
I
can't
hate
listen
that.
to all the music out there.
I hate that so much. when
And then we
people
want
do
to
that.
listen to the same, like, I've listened to this album probably hundreds
Yeah,
of
I know.
times.
You always want to go back to the
Hundreds of
tried and
times.
true, man. You gotta do that. Yeah, but I love that, and I love learning about new stuff. Like, you know, we've done hip hop episodes, we've done classic rock episodes on here, we've done singer songwriter stuff, we've done the Beatles, and it's and country too. Actually, we just did a
Cool.
country episode, so it's always really interesting to see. Local musicians, especially, where their influences are, where they lie, and what's given them inspiration to take that dive into playing in front of people.
Yeah.
And being like, well, you know, I really love this. I think we can capture some good stuff because this album spoke to me in a way that, you know, gave me the courage to go play in front of people, you know.
Yeah.
So I love learning about that. So
Me too, man. That's what
It's-
music's all about.
it
It's a
is.
journey.
So, do you have? This will be my last question, but I just love talking to local musicians about this, and also to remind you guys to mind your fucking business when you're out there listening to us. Sometimes, not most of you. Most of you are really cool. Some of you are not. Do you have a favorite heckler story that's happened to you? Like recently?
Okay. I don't think this would be my favorite, but it is pretty funny. So I was at Troubled Waters Brewing, and I was with Matt and Jody, and I was
Mm-hmm.
just learning how to do the beatbox, or like and like get the loop right with my loop pedal, because we didn't have a drummer, so sometimes you kind of need it. And I was trying to get the,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I was trying to loop it like just right, and there kept being this gap where
Yeah.
the drum beat just wasn't working.
You're right.
And there were these people in the back like, "Come on, you can do it!" And I think they heard me on the mic like, "One more try, hang on guys, let me just try one more time." Oh,
Yeah.
oh shit, come on, one more time, let me
Yeah.
just try. And then there are these people in the back like, "Come on, you can do it! Like, let's do it!" And there
Yeah.
are these older people, and I'm just like, "Fuck you!" And then I got it, and then we were jamming, and then they were like, "Yeah, that's right, you guys got it, you did it." I'm like, "Oh man,
my
not as
God.
sweet a victory as I thought," but it was okay. It like kind of like got me like anxious enough that it was a do or die moment.
I had a great one at Troubled Waters too. My favorite of all time.
I think I know the story, but
You
please
do.
tell
You were
it.
there.
Please tell.
You
it.
were there for it. So I told this on an episode, but I wanted to cut it because I wanted to tell it with you, because it's too fucking good. So are we still rolling, by the way? Nice. Okay, thank you. So I'm at Troubled Waters Brewing. I'm having a phenomenal night. Like I'm feeling good. Everything's sounding good. The room
It's
is
a great
good.
venue
It's a
for
good
you, too.
crowd. It's great. I loved it.
Yeah.
I met some new people out there that I'm still friends with today. This was December of 2019, right before I quit my day job. This guy walks in, showed up drunk, so you already know it's going to be a fucking nightmare. Shows up drunk with a table of people, and what do the drunkest people in the room do when they go see live music? They sit in the very fucking front, and they bother the hell out of you. So this guy was just in my fucking shit the whole time. So he's with his friends. He's with 4 or 5 people at the table. His 4 or 5 friends decide that this bar is not for them. Great. Move on. Good riddance. I'll see you next time. See you never. This guy stayed by himself. So now I have no airbag for this.
Yeah.
I have nobody going like, "Hey, shh, he's, nobody's doing that.
I forgot about this.
Nobody's doing that." So this guy is totally alone by himself. Tom's up there playing the saxophone with me. And we're about to play, I think he was playing like, we did Into the Mystic together.
Nice.
And then we did another song. I can't remember. Maybe like That Girl Is You, Dave Matthews. And then we did like a little funky version of like Superstition or something like that. He played the soprano sax on that. So in between one of those songs, I can't remember which I ended on. It was probably the Dave Matthews song. Let's be real. In between the song, I was getting ready, like tuning up, and I was saying, "Thank you so much for being here. This was a great night. I'm so glad to meet you guys. This is always a great spot. It's so good to play." Because I think I had like a string of really empty rooms recently, which happens.
Yeah.
It's nothing against the places that I play at. It's just sometimes it just happens.
Sometimes it's just a slow night.
It's tough luck, man. Whatever. So, I was playing for a lot of empty rooms. So I was like, "Thank you guys for being here. This is so great." And I'm in the middle of talking and thanking everybody and like just being like so gracious, and I was filled with happiness in that moment. And this guy goes from the front table, he goes, "Shut the fuck up and play a song, asshole."
I remember that, man. And like everybody was like dead silent.
And I was like, "What?"
What did you? I can't remember because I was on the patio when this happened, but I just remember everybody was like silent.
Oh, so everybody was silent. Steph kind of looks at me like she heard it, but didn't know he was directing it at me. So Steph has told me countless times, she's like, "Listen, if anybody bothers you, just, tell me, and I'll get them out of there. I'll handle it." And I was like, "No, I got
I'm just picturing the look on her face when this guy was doing that.
I was like, "I got this one." Yeah. So I turned to Tom and I go, did you hear this guy?" And Tom's laughing his ass off already. Like he's in stitches because I'm like, "What?" Because we were feeling good. We had a good night. And so I turned to the guy and I go, "Hey, you having a good time tonight, man?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Good, then shut the fuck up," and like right into the song and like on the mic, and everybody's like, "Oh, somebody," like, because I'm like, "Dude, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this."
Yeah.
So I just told him to shut the fuck up, and then that was it. And then he left, and then he was trying to find an Uber and like bumming cigarettes outside, and I was like, "You want to come talk to me now?" He goes, "We can talk now." I was like, "Dude," Tom was laughing so hard in that moment.
You're not so brave when you're a real
God.
person, not just jamming out.
Yeah, I was like, "Listen, you want to come talk to me? Come talk to me like a man. Don't yell from a table and be like, 'Shut up, asshole.' Like, yeah, come talk to me, man. We'll figure it out. I'll figure it out before you do, but we'll figure it out." And he was I've never seen him till this day. But yeah, it's always fun to hear those little stories. Like,
Yeah, yours is way worse. Mine is like nothing.
oh, I've I've had so many people though, man. Like I call, go bye, have a good practice. Jasmine's going to coach. I love you. I love you. Why didn't she say it back? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right, now that she's out of here. All right, let's wrap this up. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I've had so many wild moments that happen to me. Where like, do you ever have a fan interaction and it just takes you back a second? You're like, did that actually just happen?
Oh yeah, I think like the best like
what?
One of the best compliments I can get as a musician is when people are dancing to our music.
Yeah.
Especially when it's people that you don't know. It's like, okay, it's not pity dancing. Like they're straight up dancing. And I used to love this, especially at Troubled Waters when we play there a lot. When they had the outdoor sound system, is we'd be playing indoors and people would come out and then come inside and they would just like immediately not even get a drink. They're just listening to us. And then we'd like be like 15 minutes and like, okay, like we're gonna take a short break. And they're like, oh no! And then they come up, they're like, we were not gonna come here, but you guys sound so good. We had to come in. And you're like, God, thank you. I feel like a rock star.
That takes you back. That takes you back in a way where you're like, oh man, I'm doing something good. Thank God.
Yeah.
I always love hearing that where they go like, man, I wasn't gonna stop in here tonight, but we heard you from the street. We wanted to stop in for a beer. Like, thanks so much. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that like makes you keep coming back, man. Because for every guy that tells me, the one guy that says shut the fuck up and play a song, asshole. Yeah, there are 99 other people that go like, thank you so much for your music, man, and that's what keeps you coming back. Now the heckler stories are way funnier, but but yeah, I've met so many people through this that I wouldn't have met otherwise, which is such a obviously it's like working in a place where you just got lucky and got a job at, or like I still have some of my friends from my first job back here when I moved back home to Tampa, and it was I still keep in touch with those guys for forever, but music is such a universal language to everybody that it's and not only that, but the fact that like people that do what you do and play in front of crowds and deal with the same bullshit that you do with not getting paid and people bothering you and like all the intricacies of the sound problems that happen in certain rooms, everybody's there. We're all kindred spirits. Like it's happened to everybody.
Yep.
We've all played for free. We've all been talked shit about. There's people that come in there just to fuck with you. Just they're being dicks to be a dick. But at the same time, there's also like a community of like we're trying to make a difference in the only way that we know how.
Yep.
What the hell is that? You hear that?
Sounds like water.
Oh, you know what? I bet you it's the washing machine. I was like, oh my God, something's running in here. We got a leak. Not good. No, it always happens. So, yeah, man, it was. It's so great. It's so great to have something like that in your life, and like I love just going out and listening, man.
Oh, me too, man.
It's one of my favorite things.
Music
man.
is like a reflection of society.
Yeah, it is. When I go out of town, the only thing that I want to do is like go try to check out the local live music, not to get up and play a song with the guy. Okay, don't do that. Don't go out of town. Don't go to a bar that you're like, hey, I'm visiting. Can I play a song with my friend? No, I don't know you. Okay, don't do that. Just if you're a musician from another place and you come up to me or Justin and go like, hey, do you mind if I jam with you guys for a second? The answer is always going to be no, okay? Go play at your own spot. But anyway, I digress.
We'll make some exceptions.
Yeah.
But you got to be really fucking good.
Yeah.
And I want to hear you before you go on because you're not going to ruin this venue for us. I'm sorry.
Right. That's the thing.
So if you're like, I can jam out on the sax and then I hear you in the parking lot on a break, I'm like, hell yeah. Come on in, buddy.
Right.
But if you're like, yeah, I've been playing guitar for a little bit and like, I want to play this jam song.
Have I told you the Stevie Wonder story?
No.
So there was a guy at Silver King Brewing. We always get a good crowd at Silver King. Shout out Silver King. You guys are the fucking best. Thank you so much for having us last time for our Dave show. It was dope. So we went to Keith and I are doing a Dave show there, and Tom's there too, but I don't think he's on stage at the time. But Tom has his area set up to where like the carpet is there, and like there's a microphone for the saxophone, and the he's got a chair or whatever for his stuff. So he's kind of coming in and out of the set with us. This guy comes up and he's like, hey man, can I sit in with y'all? I was like, nope. And then Keith is like, what do you want to play? And I'm like, Keith, stop. But Keith's just like busting his balls a little bit. Keith is a much more approachable guy than me. Like I immediately when chicks come up and come talk to us at the stage, I immediately will turn my back. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. Because here's what happened to me. Let me finish the Stevie Wonder story because there's so many popping in my head right now. This guy comes up and he was like, "Yeah, I play a little guitar. You guys got an extra guitar?" And I was like, "Nah, man, we don't really do it. We got a planned set tonight. No, thanks." I was like, "No, man." I was like, "We got a show going on. Come on, like move." And he was like, "I played with Stevie Wonder, man." I was like, "Oh yeah, did you?" And then I was messing with my dad, and I was like, "Yeah, it turns out though it was Stephen Wonder from Nantucket, not the real Stevie." Yeah, no, it was like, oh my God. I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? Do you think this is going to be like your shot? This is going to be the movie they make about your life now? I got up and played with these guys, and I immediately got signed to a record deal. It doesn't work like that, man.
I get it. You want to have fun, but you know, you gotta earn it.
Read the room.
It's not easy to get to find a gig, especially nowadays. And you know, when you're just like jumping up, it's just like kind of like breaking things apart. I'll tell you one heckler story that I thought was hilarious.
Hit me.
I was playing with my buddy Justin Crimmins from college. He lives down in Fort Myers. He plays with the Coolest Blues Band. He's amazing, like Delta Blues Man type of style. I mean, he's great, and he's got a very unique voice and a good songwriter. And he plays at this place called the 86 Room every Tuesday in downtown Fort Myers. And I'm down there, and we're jamming together, and he's got his full band. And I mean, it's just, we're really wailing and having a good time. And we're playing like Sweet Home Chicago or some blues, I don't know, some blues standard with our own twist. And this woman comes up to us. She's probably like in her 30s. And she's like, "Can I play a song?" And we're just like, "No." She's like, "I want to sing a song." And then she grabs the mic and she's totally trying to be Janis Joplin. And I have this whole thing on recording because we were doing an Instagram Live. I will
send this to me.
It's hilarious. And my friend Justin, he's just no bars, will just straight up tell you like, get the fuck off the stage. And she's and after we sing the song, which was totally out of key, she hit a few cool growls, but for every one she's saying like 50 bad notes, you know, totally Janis Joplin. Right. Probably sounds like shit in the microphone.
God, no, it's fine.
That out. And
anyway, what it sounded like.
She's like, the girl was wasted, and she's talking to my friend Justin. Guy has the same name, and she's like, "Hi, my name is Christy, and how about we play a song?" He's like, my buddy Justin goes, how about you go sit at the bar? And she's like, "Oh, what?" And she's like, "Listen," she's like, "I'm here out of town, and I'd love," he's like, "Please go sit at the bar." And she's like, No. He's like, No, Yoko, no, Yoko, no, go sit at the bar. And then his dad at one point, who was coming out to visit, because I was there, he comes out, and you see him, he's like talking to his son, he's like, "Justin, you got to take control of the situation." Yeah. and like this like thing is going on for a few minutes, and finally one of her friends comes up and like, "Christy, come on, let's go." She's like, "Please, just one song, just one song." And we're like, "Okay." And we just like, while she's like trying to do this, we're playing. Dude, it was so funny. I'll send you the video. It was
you have to.
A classic Justin Crimmins
moment.
To. If you meet the guy, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
You have to, man.
Funny as hell.
That's so funny. So one more thing before we go. Let me just say this about the hecklers, and I don't know if you know this or not. I don't like to stereotype people at all, but here we go. I'm going to power through it. The worst hecklers that I get are white chicks. Drunk white chicks. All the time. Every fucking time. Every time it's an issue where it goes beyond, like, no one has ever spoken to me like that.
Yeah,
like,
that was one of those moments.
Yeah. Guess what? Now I'm talking to you like this because you're in my fucking job. I'm not going to go sit behind you when you cut hair at Supercuts and go, "Hey, I think you missed a spot." Okay? No.
Yo, can I get like a celeb cut,
Yeah,
please?
no. I'll tell you this too. This shit really fucked me up. Okay? This typical like fucking dolled up hot chick in her early 20s was out there, total box of hair, total idiot. Just comes up. I got my back turned to the mic, so I'd be standing like in front of it. I'm going to the bar to get a drink. I'm on break. She comes up and grabs it like this and goes like, "Hey!" Like starts singing the song that was on the jukebox. Probably Friends in Low Places or Mr. Brightside or Brown Eyed Girl. Pick a fucking song. One of the white girl anthems, okay? So she started doing that. She's like, "Why can't I hear myself?" And I was like, "I muted it." And she was like, I was like, "Can you get off of my shit, please?"
Yeah.
And she just looks at me. She goes, "But do you hate it? Do you hate it?" I was like, "Yeah, I hate it, and I hate you. Can you please go?"
Oh man!
And
my buddy Justin, we get along perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Seriously.
I was like, Justin sounds like my kind of fucking guy.
Yeah,
I was like, "I hate it and I hate you. Please go away." And then earlier, I had overheard them saying like they're in town from Denver, so they're like, "Oh yeah, we have one more night in town, then we got to catch our flight." So as they were leaving, I go, "Goodbye, don't miss your flight." because I'm like, please don't stay here any longer than you have to.
Yeah.
I don't want you running into my friends and having them deal with this. It's so bad, dude. But it's like, yeah, do you hate it? Yep, I sure do. She was awful. She left immediately after that. I'm like, buddy, can you get control of her?
She probably talked so much shit about
she was
you.
like, he was such a dick. He wouldn't let me sing.
Fuck that
Shut
guy.
the fuck up. I wouldn't let you sing. Go to a fucking karaoke bar, okay? Go to a karaoke bar and sing Don't Stop Believing. Well, we're going to have to edit this. Wow. Yeah. Sorry about that, ladies. Yeah, but seriously, the drunk white chicks are absolutely the most prominent hecklers.
And just to be fair and well-rounded, there are some really stupid drunk white guys.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Let's round this whole circle.
Oh, no. I'm not discrediting that.
I know.
For sure. They're even worse. Final one I'll tell because I don't.
Please, this is nice.
I'm gonna blow the whole thing here.
This is
all
what
these
musicians
stories that I've
do.
been saving. So this guy came up to me. I told this story the other night when I was at Harbor Bar after the Nona, which is a horrible idea to do on a Monday night. It totally sets the tone for your week.
Yeah.
Harbor Bar on a Monday night basically says you're blacking out at some point this week, but you don't know when. Here we go. But it was fun. So this guy came up to us after our Dave show at our most recent one at Silver King. He comes up to us and he goes, "Oh man, I love your sound, guys. Thank you. Thanks for playing." I was like, "Thank you very much. Started off great." He goes, I was like, "Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being here." And he goes, "You guys sound like that band. They're like an indie Irish folk band. What's the name of the band?" I was like, "I don't know. Figure it out before you come up and talk to us." He stood there for 2 minutes trying to think of the band name in the middle of all our cables, and we're like unwinding. And goes, I was like, "Is it?" Keith is like, "Oh, is it these guys?" And I was like, he's like, "No, it's I don't know. One of the guys has a brother in another band." I'm like, "What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Can you get out of the way? Think of it, or look it up on your phone. You got a fucking phone in your pocket. Go do something about it." Like, we're sitting here staring at this guy like, "Are you gonna come up with anything at all?" Nothing. He had nothing. So we're like, "Okay, man, we're trying to get broken down. Like, let's move." Like, if you have something to say, don't come up and be like, "Hey, do you know that song that's like, how's it go?" Already done. You had your 5 seconds. It's over. You drop something in the tip bucket. You go, "Hey, do you know any X?" Boom. Yes, no, leave, and that's it. Unless you're nice. If you're nice, you can hang out. But if you're gonna be doing this, like, don't do that. It's insane. I could tell these stories for days, man. But also, I am so fucking fortunate to do what I do, and I love what I do, and I love going to do what I do.
From a CPA who used to practice, it's a lot. I will take a heckler any day over
100%.
somebody calling you and saying, "Hey, I'm going to make a big problem out of something that will not turn out not to be a problem," and the person probably knows it's not going to be a big problem, and the next thing you know, you're working through the weekend on that problem, and then it gets to Monday, and it's like, "Oh, that actually really didn't matter."
Yeah, it's
putting things into different perspective.
Yeah, I do complain a lot because, like I said again, it's a character, guys. Okay, I'm not actually like this all the time. I just think it's funny sometimes to get this riled up. But I will say, though, I am so lucky to do what I do. And it really puts it in perspective when you get one of those good compliments where you're like, "Oh, man, that made my week."
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I have friends. Like recently, this is just a specific instance, but Greg Hansen, if you're listening, thank you, Greg. Recently, I came home from one of the worst gigs I've ever had. Like, historically one of the worst. I played a private party for 3 fucking hours out in Clearwater Beach. I got 0 claps. I got tipped by 2 people, and I got interrupted and like talked to in the middle of a song, like screaming in my ear kind of thing, like, "Can you say happy birthday?" Like that kind of stuff. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So that whole thing happened. I'm like on the way home from the gig, and I get a message from Greg, and it's a screenshot of him listening to my EP. He was like, "This is great work, man. Been meaning to get around to it. Great stuff. Like, good job," or whatever. Sounds good. And I was like,
"It is good. By the way, check it out if you haven't. Before You Dig is amazing."
Thank you for the plug. Yeah, we're gonna be doing some new music soon. Hopefully, by the time that this is out, we'll have some singles to share with you guys. I hope. But yeah, dude, like little stuff like that. Like when you have a shitty night, it all puts it in perspective. Where you're like, "Oh, you know what? I have done some cool stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's not all bad." it can seem like that at a time where like you're there like attacking people with entertainment that they just don't want, and it's just like a total bummer for them to even be there. But little stuff like that. So, and that's not to say that Greg's the only guy that's ever done that. You know, there's a ton of my friends that are super gracious and generous, and you're one of those guys, man. You hype me up all the time, and I love that. And we hype each other up too. Like, I love your stuff, and you know, you're a big fan of mine as well, and I really appreciate that. You come out to see me a lot more than I come out to see you, and I have
more time on my hands, my friend.
I need to come out, and you're closer too. I gotta come out. I am
closer too.
I gotta come out and see it more though, man. But the support your friends, man. These ventures into musicianship are never easy, and it just takes a second to be like, hey, man, you know, thinking about you, heard this song on the radio, you know, sounds like you, hope you're doing well, things like that, you know, like just little stuff, man, that keeps us going through the day, because like a lot of the time musicianship and being a musician is a very lonely job a lot of the times. You know, like, I mean,
it's way different from the corporate world.
Yeah. You're surrounded by a lot of people all the time, and like you're always around another voice, another face. But like for the most part, what I do today, if I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Jasmine for maybe 10 minutes before tonight, and I'm sitting around here all day doing nothing, maybe writing a little bit, playing some Xbox, editing on the computer, you know, doing some stuff, trying to get booked. But for the most part of the time, I spend a lot of it by myself. So it's a pretty lonely endeavor, you know. So that's why when you see a musician, man, and you know you are appreciating what they're doing, let them know, you know, because a lot of us our love language is words of affirmation, if that's one of them. Isn't it one the 5 love languages? I don't know.
Words of affirmation, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Probably. A lot of us love that. So, thank you for supporting us, man. You got anything else before you go? Can you plug your stuff again, please?
Yeah, it'd be great.
And any shows coming up in like the springtime? I think this will be out.
Yeah.
Then, so.
All of our events are on our Facebook page at guavatrainofficial.com. Nice. At Guavatrain Official is our tag for Facebook, and you find us, like us on the events. You'll see all of our upcoming shows. We'll be playing at Crooked Thumb, at Three Daughters, Trouble Waters Brewing. We play at the Nona Slice House a lot. Definitely check us out on Instagram and follow us if you can at Guava Train Official. It sounds very vain, and it kind of is, but those follows and those likes, if you want to help out your musician friends, it's an easy way to go about it. The difference between 500 versus 1,000 followers, it can mean huge. Big money for us. And check us out. And if you have a song request or whatnot, please let us know, and hopefully you enjoy, and
only
get you to boogie.
Only Brazilian bossa nova requests.
Yes, we actually the coolest gig we did before the pandemic. We played a wedding down in Miami, and it was a Brazilian wedding, and it was freaking amazing. Dope. Yeah, it was, and we really busted out the bossa nova on that one. It was great.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, man. Thank you for talking.
Thanks for having me, man.
Beatles and hecklers. Thank you so much, man. This was a blast.
Yeah, and thanks for listening, for everybody to listen.
Yeah, dude. Thank you guys for listening to both parts. This is the second part of our Beatles dive. Maybe we'll do Revolver or Abbey Road or some solo Lennon or McCartney or something like that sometime soon too. I would love to do that again. This was a lot of fun, man. Thank you guys again for listening. As always, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Please give it a share. Let your friends know about it. We're still growing here. We're building, but we're going to get there. Thank you for those of you who have already liked and followed our Facebook and Instagram pages. That is the Scratch Track Podcast. Our Gmail is the scratchtrackpod@gmail. So if you want to send us an email, if you don't do the whole DM thing, our Gmail is that. And that way you can send us an email of what musicians you want to have on here, who you think would be a good guest, what album you think would be good to dive into. And also, lastly, my name is Josh Plummer. I am a local musician around the area too. So if you haven't followed already, please do. Josh Plummer Music on Instagram and Josh Plummer Music on Facebook as well. And I got a little EP out. And hopefully by now, Honey I, the single off of The Elephant Rope, will be out soon. Whoops! I just said the title. Yikes. Now we have to cut. Or not. Or maybe it'll be exposed. So that's the first single off of the album that'll be out soon. So thank you guys for listening again. And this is Justin Rice. Make sure to follow him and go see the Guava Train. These guys put on a hell of a show. We will see you next time in a couple Thursdays. Bye.